Jenny from the Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana. Thank you for joining us for our online quilt along, Double Dozen by Kaye England. We're on month 9 already. Can you believe it? This month is called the Northumberland Star. There's a couple great tools that you'll need to get started. Come on over and check it out. You want a Woolly Wonders pressing mat. It's very helpful for pressing bulky seams. A nice hot iron, some best press, and I love this new spray bottle that you can disperse it very evenly without it spurting out. You need some sort of marking utensil, nice sharp rotary cutter, some thread, rotary mat, and maybe some thread snips. You also need some fabrics. So here we are with our fabric choices. This is our finished traditional colorway, and we have this beautiful Northumberland Star. In this one we have the dark fabric located forming this sawtooth star on the outside. In the center is relatively a light or a medium, and then some mediums out here. And so the look of the block may look a little bit different than if you were to rearrange your light, medium, and dark values. The pattern calls for a real dark here, so you could certainly do that. If you want to look at our cave colorway, it has a little bit different effect. We have a dark here, which is where we had kind of a medium in the other colorway, and then all this green is a medium, which will form the star, and this is our center block, which is quite light compared to the other colorway. So have some fun picking some fabrics or enjoy cutting up your kit from class. For Northumberland Star, there's a few units that are easy to cut. Those are the outer squares, which are here, and the other corners, and then obviously that center square is a nice solid cut. Everything else in this unit or this block is triangles. So there are either quarter square triangles or half square triangles. Let me point out the quarter square triangles, which is this light fabric out here, and there's 4 of those. I believe that is called light D. And then there are these triangles, this one right here, which is called C, and it's a medium fabric. So this one here, it's also here, 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 there, and there. So those are quarter square triangles. All the rest of the triangles in this unit or this block are half square triangles. So when you're dealing with bias edges, it's very important to be considerate of where your cuts are and what you're going to be sewing. All right, we're going to talk about the half square triangle units, which we've discussed are here, here, here. Those are half squares, these are half squares. So let me show you how those units are cut and a couple tricks to make them a little bit more stable. So this is one of the green squares. I'm starting off by starching it very heavily. It's very damp, and I'm going to let that dry for a moment, and then I will make sure that that's a nice stable surface so that when you actually get to sewing it, it behaves a little bit more like paper versus stretching or moving as fabric would. So I've pre-starched all my fabric. You could do that getting ready by pre-starching all your fabrics as larger pieces and then sub-cutting them after they've dried and you've ironed them. So this piece is going to get cut to a 2 3/8. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll square up my right hand side, or whatever hand you're dominant with. I'll do the top and the side, and then I'm going to lift it and rotate it so that I'm cutting from that nice squared up side. And I'm going to find the 2 3/8 inch mark. So it should be just under the half. And I have a Creative Grids ruler, so I have this nice little elbow. There's 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, and the same thing coming from the 2 there. So I'm going to be cutting one more time to get a 2 3/8 inch square. Now this is a nice straight square. Now for cutting a half square triangle unit, I'm going to cut it once diagonally. And what you can use is this diagonal line on your ruler, and you can lie it along one of those straight edges. And when you've got it just lined up, it should intersect those points. If it doesn't intersect those points, that might mean that you don't have a perfect square cut, so that can double check yourself. So now when I cut that, I'll yield 2 triangles. So half of that square is a triangle. It's called a half square triangle unit. I have my straight grain here, my cross grain here, and my bias edge here. So when I go to sew that, this edge is going to be stretchier. That's one reason why I starched it pretty heavily. But then when you go to put it in your block, you just need to be conscious of where that is. So let's pick this triangle up and put it in our block. It goes right here. it also goes here, here, and so on. So that bias edge is that longer edge, and it is living right here. I just showed you how to cut half square triangle units. I'm going to show you a little trick with this unit that is light B and dark B, making a half square triangle unit. We've talked about block locks in the past, and that's what we're going to use here. So if you were to do this unit traditionally as covered in the book, you would be cutting 2 triangles, sewing them together with a 1/4 of an inch seam, and then hoping that it measures the right measurement, correct? So what you could do is you could use a block lock method, which is cutting the light and the dark larger. You layer them right sides together, and you cut them a little bit bigger. I cut this 2 3/4, and then you layer them right sides together. You mark the diagonal, and then you sew on each side of the line. Once you sew on each side of the line, you have a half square triangle unit there and there, so it yields 2. The other beauty about the block lock ruler is you can square up your unit. So I'm going to cut it down the center. I will press it towards the dark, and then I'll square that unit up using the block lock. Now, it took a little while for me to figure out the math, but what you're going to trim this down to is 2 inches. It will finish at 1.5 inches, but you will trim it down to 2 inches. So this is too big right now, but the block lock is wonderful for trimming down your units. So you'll trim one side, and then you slide your ruler to the 2-inch mark, which is right here, and then you will cut each direction, and then you'll have a beautiful half square triangle unit that was a little bit easier to sew. So you could do that way using the block lock method. Now we're going to talk about 1/4 square triangles. In the block, it makes up the medium C triangles and this light D triangle. So the way a 1/4 square triangle is cut is a little bit different. You still start with a square, and you'll end up with 4 out of it when you're done. So your square will be quite a bit larger. This one is going to be the medium C, and I've already pre-starched this very heavily with best press, pressed it, and then squared it to 4 1/4. So that's what the directions call for. And then I'm going to cut it diagonally 2 times. So when you're cutting it diagonally, you want to be very mindful of making sure it's accurate, and you want to be mindful when you're sewing it, because you have now 2 bias edges. So I've cut one direction, and then I'm going to rotate my ruler, and I'm going to cut the other direction from point to point. Now our outside square edges are straight a grain or cross grain, and when I'm doing this cut, I now have bias edges on the inside of that triangle, and you can see I'm taking my time here trying to get it just right. Now I have 4 triangles, so that is a 1/4 square triangle unit. Here's my straight a grain, here's bias and bias. Let's go lay it in our block so you can see where those bias edges line up. So right here is where that lives. I have a bias edge here, here. This is also a 1/4 square triangle, so this is bias edge, and this is bias edge. That's when you want to be very mindful sewing and making sure you're not pushing or pulling the fabric. All right, we have cut all the units, triangles, and squares for our block. You might have used the block lock method for these units right here, but everything else is triangles and squares. So once you get your block all laid out, there are a few things to be conscious of. This unit right here is the same as this unit, although it's a mirror image. So I would highly suggest a design wall or a design board. I have it on a Prop-It design board, which has a stand on the back. And when you lay out your block, when you get ready to sew those units, you can grab the unit, flip it right sides together, get a pin or a wonder clip, and pin the correct side so that when you move to your sewing machine, this could be a wonder clip here, when you move to your sewing machine, you are going to be sewing the right side, the correct side. So I'm going to come over to my sewing machine. I'm on a Bernina 780, and I have a dual feed 1/4 inch foot. I've started on a little piece of fabric, and I'm starting along the straight edge versus starting in that corner. And I will get ready to start sewing, and I'll be a 1/4 of an inch seam. I'll sew up to my pin, pull it out, and this is when you just want to take your time. You don't need to be sewing super fast here, and sew your 1/4 of an inch seam. So here I am at my ironing board, and when I press that unit, you want to be pretty gentle with it. Remember, we have bias edges to be considerate of. And when you open that up, just finger press it open, push it down, and then iron it. Actually press it. This would be ironing. If you're ironing it, you could get things to shift. So once that is all pressed and cooled, this should still be a nice triangle. You should have a straight edge here. Then when you go to put it back into your block, it'll be like that. So work on these units, then you'll start working on these units. This unit is flipped like so. Put a pin in it so that when you go over to your ironing board, you know you're sewing the correct side of that block. Be gentle when you press, work your way around, and create your Northumberland star block. Thanks for joining us on making our Northumberland star block. This is Jenny from the Sewing Palace. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. We're signing off. See you next month. Bye-bye.